The Midas List is a data-driven ranking. These are the investors who are backing world-changing companies in the technology sector all over the world. We take submissions from dozens of VC firms across hundreds of partners, and we look at qualifying deals that meet a couple key criteria. They need to have had an exit via an acquisition or an IPO over the past 5 years. Or the company needs to have raised money from another investor, not the investor we're looking at least twice the valuation that investor originally gave it, also within the past 5 years. We look at companies that are valued at least $400 million by the private market or $200 million at IPO or acquisition. An interesting thing about the Midas List is we can see waves of technology companies moving onto the list, driving investors onto it. And they're often the same companies that we are using for shopping, for hailing cars, getting groceries. These tech companies that we depend on are also the ones that are getting those large valuations and market caps and putting the most investors on the list. The 2021 Midas List is an interesting transition because we see companies like Affirm in payments, Stripe, Coinbase, Robinhood, DoorDash, Airbnb. This is the new guard of companies driving 10 plus investors onto the Midas List. They're replacing companies like Uber, Lyft, Twitter, those big companies that we still depend on. But if you think about it, they've been around for a few years now. Uber still puts someone like Bill Gurley onto the Midas List, but Airbnb is putting 14 people onto the Midas List. And to see that change of the guard happen in real time is really fun for me. There was a ton of change on this year's Midas List, more than we've seen in past years. We had 23 newcomers, that's almost 1/4 of the entire list, had never been on the list before. We also had 10 returnees. That includes a total newcomer in the top 10, Michael Speiser from Sutter Hill, who was a key investor and actually the first CEO of our cover company from January, Snowflake, as well as a returnee in the top 10 and a exciting newcomer woman in the top half of the list in Hershenson. She and her partner Pejman Nozad were early investors in DoorDash with a relatively small check, but a big one for the size of their fund. That led to a position with profits in the hundreds of millions. This year's Midas List had 12 women on it. That is tied for a record with 2019. Unfortunately, this is not the number that we would necessarily hope to see moving forward, and it reflects the work that still needs to be done in the venture capital industry. But some of the women on the list do represent a new guard of investors who we expect to see on the list for many years to come. We are really hopeful at Forbes to see the diversity of the list evolve over time and continue to reflect the efforts of the industry. It's also a reminder of how far we have to go. The cool thing about the Midas List is you can see the trends of technology changing. You can see the waves of new companies that everyone cares about, uses, depends on. And so in the pandemic, these companies that we saw popping up were Robinhood, Coinbase, DoorDash, even Airbnb as people were traveling domestically and to go work from anywhere. And so this whole new wave of technology companies was unsurprisingly driving these investors onto the list. So we've seen the companies of the past year really take off and that affect the list. And we know that as Stripe, Coinbase, and some of these others like Robinhood go public themselves, they'll have an even bigger impact in the future.